Okay, let's build our app again. We're back. We are back. Let's build our app again. This time around, hello, are we back? Maybe? 1 extra minute. Okay, I may have picked up the reason why our API broke, right? So our API broke because in our app, we created a timestamp. Anybody remember the timestamp we created? So in our application, we created a timestamp, which is a string. But in Postman, we did not add a created at date. Do we all see that? In Postman, we had 3 fields. In Postman, we have 3 fields. They're all strings, correct? There's no created at property there. Do we see that? The API itself creates a created at if you do not supply one. It creates one with a double, a time interval, right? So that's where the problem was, okay? So at this point, don't create any more post requests in Postman for now, because we've done that before. We saw what that looked like. Going forward, we'll create it in our app because we've tested that already. Okay, so far so good? So back in our app, let's go back and uncomment out our created at string. Go back to your question model, uncomment out created at, uncomment out created at. I'm in the question model. Go back to your lab questions controller and go back to your cell for row, uncomment out cell dot detailed text label, uncomment that out. And lastly, where we do our fetching, go to load questions, and make sure you uncomment out where it says questions.sorted. And at this point, run the app again. Assuming nobody posted after the fact, we should be okay. Great, we're back to where we were on Friday. Okay? We're back to where we were on Friday. So if you want to use Postman for some reason, just do created at and put a string in there. Just put some string in there, and then we'll handle it. But for now, we're just testing it out. We're back to our app. Our app works. Yes, sir?
What did you do in between this step and the first step?
The first step was the model, the question model. I uncommented out created at. Second step, myself a row. I uncomment out cell dot detailed text label. And the third was in our load questions, I uncomment out where it said sorted there. And if you run the app, you should get all your questions sorted by date. Most recent showing first. Is it a bad idea to have optional properties in your model? It's not a bad idea. That's the only way we could do it. Because if the data is optional or could be nil, our options, our properties could be nil as well. Yes, Chelsea? The UI.
Well, you said so long as nobody posted, you should be able to.
No. In Postman, like if anybody goes rogue and then they go to Postman again and post the next post, our API will crash because it will expect a string, it will get a double. In our question model right now, it expects a string. In Postman today, we created a double. So it would crash our app with decoding error, right? Unless we go, well, we could go and do an enum like we did before, but there's no reason for that because we know we're sending up a string. Our app sends up a timestamp, which is a string. Cool? Any other questions? So our API is back. We are working again. We have our questions in a sorted manner by date, most recent showing first. So let's continue on. Did everybody able to show their detailed view with an image, right? Yes? Okay, so we could see everything. We could see our lab name. We could see our question here. Now let's go ahead and do post first. Let us go do post. Let me review what that looks like. So in our app, in the top right area, we'll add an answer button, an answer UI bobbin item. So when I click on that answer UI bobbin item, it will present us a modal view with a text view. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and do just that. Let's go to our storyboard. Storyboard. Navigate over to your detail view controller and search for a bar item. Well, bar item. A bar button item. Drag it over to your scene and we'll simply call it answer or not answer. Answer is fine for now. Answer is fine for now. Great, great, great. And answer, when we click on answer, we should be presenting some modal view with a text view in it. So let's go ahead and add a view controller. Add a view controller to our canvas. I'm going to put it, that's fine. I'll put it at the bottom here. I'll put it right here. And go ahead, control drag from the answer over to our view controller. And we want to present modally. Present modally. Great. So I presented modally, and this is what I want. Right? Everybody has their modal view? Okay. In my modal view, I want to have a cancel button, and I want to have a post button, like post the answer. So I want to have two bar button items. If I go back to my scene, I want to have a bar button item. Drag it over. There's a problem here. I have no bar. So Command Z, I have no bar, so I need a bar, right? I need a bar. I could do a couple things. I could just have a button there. I could have a button that acts like a bar button item, or I could have a navigation bar. Everybody with me? So any of those are valid. It's up to you and the designer, or up to you and yourself. If you want to have a bar, or if you want to have some sort of floating button up here, okay? So for now, we'll go ahead and we'll embed. I'll click on this view controller. If I want to have a bar, I need to embed it in a nav controller. Everybody with me? Right? So I want to go ahead and embed this view controller in a navigation controller. And all of a sudden, look at that. I have a bar, which I could drag things to. So now I want to go back and select my bar item. I'll go ahead, I'll drag my bar item here. And I will option click to get a second one over here. The first one will be cancel, and the second one will be post. Post answer, for example. Yes? The other one gets deleted. Say that again. So when you control drag, oh, with the option, it gets deleted? No, it should not. So let me Command Z here. So if you option, anybody else gets there first, if you option click away, creating like a second view, like a second bar item, does it disappear, this first one? Chelsea? So control click on the first one you want to drag it over. The first one should still exist. It doesn't disappear. Command Z and do it again. Command Z, do it again. Okay, how we doing? Okay, so we said our item was called cancel, since this person doesn't want to create a question, or you could post your answer. Okay? What we'll call this? Create answer. Let's give this a name. Let's give this a name. We'll call it create answer for now. So create answer needs a view controller class as well. We don't have a view controller class for it yet. So we'll create a view controller class for it. Okay, so let's go create a new class. We'll call it answer question controller. So Command N in the controllers folder. In your controllers folder, we have 3 controllers for so far. We'll create a 4th controller. So Command N, and it's a Cocoa Touch subclass. We'll call it answer question. Let me blow that up here. So answer question controller. It's a subclass of UI view controller. Language is Swift. And click on next. Click on create. Great, so this is our controller class here. Command A, Control I, if you have format in here. And what do we have? So far, we just have a view did load. Let us go back to our assistant editor. Get our storyboard. Option click on our answer question controller. Have it next to each other. And let's go over to our question controller here. Create answer. Let's change this. Answer question maybe. Sounds better. Okay, what does answer question have? It only has one UI element. It has a text view. One UI element, it has a text view. Text view, not text field. So let's go ahead and get a label. First off, we'll get a label. We'll position the label right above or right below our top bar, and we'll name this enter your answer below. We'll set the constraints for it. Constraints is also part, obviously, of assessment. So we have our label here. We'll add constraints. I'll set it to be about 20 from the bottom of my nav bar. So one constraint for the label so far. And second constraint will be center horizontally. So horizontally in container. That's it. 2 constraints. One from the bottom of my nav bar and one center horizontally. Next, I will get a text view. I'll get a text view over to my scene. This is my text view. Okay, great. I'll give my text view some shaded color. It's up to you what color you want. Go to view section and color. View, background color. Why don't you want to take my color, sir? Custom color. What color do I want? This is fine. Some light gray color. Up to you what color you want. And I'll remove all the text from my text view. That's it. So this is our text view, and we have a label above it. And we'll set the constraints for the text view now. So 8 to the top or the bottom of my label, 20 to the lead-in, and 20 to the trail-in. 3 constraints. And my last constraint, I'll control drag to the view itself, and I'll say equal heights. And for equal heights, I will go edit the height of it to be, what does 50% look like? I'll make it 40%. So 0.4. 0.4 multiplier is 0.4. Cool. Great. Next up, let's go connect our outlet to our view controller. Well, first of all, we need to change the class, because if I do try to change, come Thursday, if you try to do this on Thursday, it's not working. You're like, oh my God, what's happening? What's the answer? Change the class, right? So I need to go, click on my view controller, go to my identity inspector, click on the class identity inspector here, and change UI view controller to answer question, press enter. So at this point, I registered the class with that scene. So that class is associated to this scene here. Now I could go ahead and control drag as I want. So I'll control drag from my text view over to my view controller. And for the name of this, I'll simply call it answer text view. Answer text view. Questions? Post answer, we have two IB actions. We have one for cancel. Let's go ahead and control drag from cancel. It's an IB action. I'll simply call it cancel. And we have one more IB action from the post answer. Create IB action here. Post answer. Okay. So we've set up all our UI and our IB actions. We have all that set up. We could now close out our assistant editor. Close out our assistant editor and actually run the app and see if it at least segues. So run your app. Run frequently as you possibly can. So I'm in my app. I select a question. I have my answer button shows up in my nav bar. I click on it. It presents a view modally. The view I have now has a text view, which I could edit. Bring up the keyboard here, which I could edit. All right. Right now, our bar button items does not work. There's no code in there, but I could simply drag down and dismiss the view, right? So at this point, our answer does present a modal view. Yes? Excellent. So let's go write some more code. Go back to our answer question controller. Don't need this. In my cancel, I simply want to dismiss. I simply want to dismiss the view. How I dismiss the view, every view controller has a dismiss function on it. I simply type in dismiss, animated, the default animation, whatever default animation it has. For the completion handler, I could be passing information here, but most likely I'm not passing in any information after I click the cancel button. So I simply ignore the completion, like that, okay? So cancel will cancel the view. It will dismiss that entire view and go back to the detailed view, okay? Next up, when I click on post answer, this is where I want to get the answer the user entered and I want to post it to some API, okay? So this is where we're doing the majority of our work, or all the work, the majority of the work for our posting. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay. Let's go over to our API client. We have an API client in our network services. Go to the lab questions API client. Go to the lab questions API client. And let's work on post answer. Okay. Let's work on post answer. We have fetch questions, that just gets all the questions for our first table view. We have post question, it creates a question. And now we want to go ahead and do some sort of, next function will be to post an answer. We'll have post answer and we'll have fetch answers. But first we'll work on post answer. It's a function. Okay. Very similar to our posted question model. Click on your posted question model. Somebody asked on Friday, why did we have two models here? Again, this is basically for the API. Because our API right now, there's no way for us to update a question once we've created it, and there's no way to update an answer once we've created it. In the future, we could update things, right? We could pass in some default avatar, which doesn't have any avatar, and later we could update the avatar. But if we do pass an avatar now, on the API, it won't have an avatar because we're gonna override the default avatar the API gives us, right? In our posted question, we do not have an avatar, right? We do not have a name. You could pass in your own name if you want, but we don't have a name. We don't have an avatar, right? Those are the information we don't have. That will get created by the API. The API will automatically give us an avatar URL. It will automatically give us a random name, okay? So that if we pass in the values, it will override what the API gives us, okay? So to avoid that from happening, we have our own posted question model. We pass in a subset of what the API gives us. But in our full question, we have all the parameters that the API gives us. We have an avatar, we have a name, we have an ID. Again, we don't give the API the ID. The API creates an ID for us, right, automatically. So we don't send that information to the API, okay? So very similar to our question, we'll create some posted answer. We'll create a new file. It will be called posted answer. And posted answer will basically have the information we sent up earlier in Postman, plus the created time or created at. So here we have posted answer. What is it conforming to? Quotable is good. But for now, we'll just say encodable, because we'll get back an answer, not a posted answer. When we're doing our get, it will be a full answer with everything. So here we have basic information. Yes, go ahead. Because we take the model, whatever the user put into the text view, and we create data from it to send up. Exactly. That's why it's codable. Encodable, sorry. So encodable sends data up. So encodable converts Swift models to data. Okay, what does our posted answer have? It has a title of the question. The question has been answered. It has the question ID. It has the question lab name, and it has the actual answer that the user put in. So let's go ahead and add those values. So here we have the question title, string. We have the question ID. Here we have the question ID. That way we could search for the question when we actually populate in the answers table. How do we get that? How do we get the answers for a particular question? By using the ID of the question. So question ID, string here.
Where do you get your names from? Is this where you're creating the names yourself?
Those are the names that'll be sent up
Where?
to our API.
So it's called question title?
Yes.
Can you show me on which?
Can I show you? Posted questions, post answer, get answers. Right here. Can you see it, Tiffany?
And that's what you're creating.
That's what the API expects.
That's what
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll come to seeing what that looks like once we post and we get back our post. Actually, we saw it already before. We saw it this morning when we posted. Okay, so we have question ID. We have question lab name. Question lab name. Again, it needs to be the same as the JSON. That's why we have it that way. Okay, they need to be consistent with the names. And lastly, we have the answer description, which is the information we put into the text view when we answer the question. And ID, you really need an ID here for searching. So for searching answers, for searching all answers to a question. How can I find the related answers? I need that question ID. Okay, cool. So this is what our posted answer looks like. Let's continue on. This is the information we're sending up to the web API. The question title we'll have because we are passing the question over to that view controller. The only new information we'll have is the answer question description. Okay, cool. Let's continue on. So answer question controller, we are here. I'm actually in my API client. Go back to the API client, sorry. API client post answer. Post answer expects now, I'm in the API client. Post answer expects now some posted answer. Posted answer is of type posted answer. And yes, we could refactor our functions to not be repeating what we did earlier, but I really want us to type out stuff now because that's review for Friday. We need to know the processes. So here we're doing a post request. We are doing a post request. Later, we'll be doing a get request. So this is a post request to send an answer to the web API. And later we'll have a get request to get all answers. Okay. First thing we really need here, we need some sort of endpoint URL or answer endpoint URL string. From that URL string, we'll create some URL. Else here we'll have some sort of bad URL, or we need a completion here. For now, I'll just simply say return. So let's go to Postman and get our answers URL. I'll come right back. Let's first navigate over to Postman and get our answers URL. Actually, we don't have it yet. I have it. Haha. Let me slack it out. I slacked out the answers endpoint. When you have it, go ahead and paste it in. Right where it says answer endpoint URL string, paste it in. As we did on Friday, as we are doing today, as you will be doing on Thursday, if you're making a post request, those are the steps you'll be following, right? You need some sort of request or you need data. First of all, you need data. So let's get to data. So steps in making a post. request. Step one. Step one, you really want to convert your Swift model to data. How do we do that? What's the key class we need? Network helper will come along at some point, but we just reviewed it earlier this morning. I said to make notes here. I'll go back to it again. When you're doing post, those are the required things you need. You need some sort of JSON encoder will encode your Swift model to data. What's that? The bundle? The bundle was when we were reading data from JSON data, when we were converting JSON data to Swift objects. That's JSON decoder. But now we want to send data up to a web API. So the things we need to convert data. The class that converts data is JSON encoder, right? Okay, cool. No worries. Again, this is all review. We're reviewing here. No need to apologize for anything. So we need to convert Swift model to data. In that case, your Swift model here is what? It's the posted question, right? Posted answer. Let me make that lowercase. So example, posted answer. This is what we want to send up to the web. That question, this is what we want to send up to the web. The question the answer the user created, we want to send it up to a web API. So we need to convert it to data. You first need to convert it to data. And we convert it to data using what class? JSON encoder. Thank you so much. So we will use JSON encoder to convert Swift. Just put posted answer to data. So this is step one. Let's do step one. This is a do catch because JSON encoder itself throws an error or can throw an error. Very similar to its sibling in JSON decoder, also throws. Here we expect data. This is what we're trying to convert. So we try to run the method JSON encoder. On JSON encoder, we have this method called encode. It's trying to encode some value. And look, the value needs to be encodable. Do we see that? Right? As we say encode parents, the value needs to be encodable. So our value is encodable, so we could simply pass in our value here. Our value is posted answer. And indeed, we do have data. If you option click on data, it's a data object. So step one, again on Thursday, this is what you want to do. You want to convert whatever you're sending up to a web API to data. The web API does not accept some Swift model. It's looking for data. It knows how to read data. Step two, what do we need? To create a request. Very good. So step two, create a mutable URL request. Why mutable? What does mutable mean? That it could be changed. Is there only one person here today? All right, person number one. No more. Let's get somebody else. What's mutable mean? Andy, what does mutable mean? What's that? It could be changed, right? So we want to make the URL request itself mutable because we'll be adding more values to it. In our get, we could have made it a constant because our get simply said, URL request, here's your URL, you're done. But in our post, we have to add more information to it, so it needs to be mutable. For it to be mutable, we need to have a var there. We need to create a variable. So those are the differences there. Mutable, because on Friday, this is what we did on Friday. We made a mutable request so we could add information to it. If this was a let, you wouldn't be able to add anything else to it. Okay? In our get request here, it's immutable because the only thing we're creating is the URL, or the only thing we pass into the request is the URL. So let's keep going here to our step 2. Create a mutable request and assign it the URL, the endpoint URL. I'll put URL here as the URL itself, because URL is this URL that we have here. So we start off with the var keyword to make it mutable, and we say URL request. We pass it a URL. Okay? Step 2 is good. What else do I need? In no particular order, what else do I need to do? Step 3. Did we write the notes from the screenshot? No, we didn't? All right, what are we doing here? What do we need? Oh, sorry. Say again, Tanya? I need to tell you what type of data. Everybody heard that? Yes? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So step 3. Let web API know the type of data being sent. Right? So here we have our request. On our request, we say add value. And keep in mind, you could also do set value here, either or. It's fine. But just know that set value overrides. Okay? Set value overrides, add appends. If you have multiple headers you want to add, you use add. Here we only have one header to pass. We simply say add. That's fine. Okay? If you're not sure, just use add. You're not going to be overriding anything. What's our value? What's the value? This is what we did in Postman earlier this morning. We had a value and we had a field. Application. Very good. So here, be careful, guys. This is where you really want to make sure you type in correctly. Because if you do anything like this, your data will be corrupted. Right? And your post will fail. You might not see the post failing, but on the receiving side, if you try to get, the app will crash saying decoding error, malformed JSON. Because this is not JSON, this is JON, right? So make sure this is as it's written here, application / JSON. What is the header field name? Content type, very good. And content type needs to be the same as we write it here, case sensitive. This is the same as we did in Postman earlier. When we went to the header section in Postman, this is what we did. So we need to write it in Swift. The way you write it in Swift, setting a header, is this add value method. It takes in 2 params, the value and the field name. Great. What else we need to do? Step 4. Either or. Doesn't matter the order here. What's step 4? Who I haven't heard? Mr. 1, what's step 4? In no particular order. One of those HTTP things. Either one. We have the request URL. We have the type of data we're setting up. We don't have a crucial part of the exercise. The what? We have to write something to send it over. We have that thing already. It's in a warning. I mean, it's shown by the warning. We have a warning. We have some sort of variable we haven't used, some constant we haven't used. We have to use data somehow. Yes. I think Christian wants to help out. Christian, how do we use that data somehow, the request? HTTP body. Very good. So the request has an HTTP body property. We need to set that property with the data that we just converted. Remember, we don't leave our code unattended. We created this data object here. We need to use it. So use HTTP body on request to add the data from the data created from the post answer model. This is the data we are sending to the web API. And here I'll say this is similar to the Postman body code snippet we added earlier, code snippet below. And below here, we'll use a multi-line comment to add what the body looks like. So we'll all go to Postman. We'll all go to Postman and we'll copy the body that we had from this morning. Copy whatever body you had. Just copy, curly, close curly, and paste it right in there. Yes. It's in Slack. Christian, it's in Slack. Yeah, it's in Slack. So that's the body. This is the information we're sending up. The only difference between Postman and Swift, we had to convert this to data. But this is our model. No, we don't have to send anything. As a matter of fact, I wanted to structure it that way, so I named it that way. When it gets created, it will be named that way. Those keys here, we named it that way because we wanted to appear that way in the JSON. That's valid, but the API will exist already on Thursday, right? The API exists already here today too, and it expects a question lab name to be the same as it's written here. You'll know it's going to be written out in some API. All APIs have documentation to tell you what the params looks like, right? So you have that information at your disposal. And if it's not valid, a robust API, a secure API will give you an error telling you field name is mildly formed or something. Cool? Because it's expecting question ID to be camel case or whatever it is. Yes? Just for our own purposes, documentation. That body is what we sent to Postman earlier. But that's not what we send into Swift right now. I mean to the API right now. What we send in is this line of code. We send in request.http body equal to data. That data here, everybody please. That data here is this data here in Postman. But in Swift, it's our posted question.
Is that not the whole thing? Is it missing ID and create that?
It will be added on the server. On the API will create an ID. Anytime it creates a new object, it gives that object an ID. So we're not sending ID up. We're not sending ID up. Any questions? Okay, so let's move on. We're missing step 5. There's a 5th step here. What's that? we need to we're making a post request now. By default, URL session does get request. We need to let URL session know you're not doing a get request. You're making a post request. So we need to explicitly say HTTP method equal to post. Okay? So here we need to clarify the HTTP method we are using. Since by default, URL session data task does get request. Here we are making a post request. Any questions in the back?
For the network helper, product failure, is it encoding error?
We have encoding error already. Oh, you mean for, yeah. If you're going ahead, yes, in the catch block, encoding error. Okay, so step 5, let's set up the request HTTP body here. Sorry, not HTTP body, HTTP method. HTTP method equal to post. So far we've seen get, we've seen post. Others, we have put, we have delete, we have update, but for the purposes of here, this is what we're using. For the purposes of Thursday, this is what you need to know, how to make those two, and know their HTTP methods. Great, so at this point, we have set up our request. We've done everything we need to do. So now we go to our helper friend called Network Helper. So now we need to use, well, we don't need to use, but using, now we will use Network Helper URL session wrapper class to make the network post request. Right? What is Network Helper? Network Helper is a URL session wrapper class, right? So it's a few lines of code. We don't have to write every time we write in an application. We took that complexity outside and we made a helper class called Network Helper. Network Helper has URL session in it. In URL session, let's go to the Network Helper. This is Network Helper. Network Helper is a singleton. It takes our request It has a completion handler. The completion handler captures either we get data or we have an error, right? What is Network Helper? Network Helper is a helper class, as the name says. It's a helper class. So every app we write in, we don't have to write from scratch URL session, data task. We don't have to write catches for errors every time we write a new application, right? So it becomes this sort of framework that we use. Anytime you catch yourself rewriting code multiple times, make a helper class, make an extension, make some sort of helper, whatever it is, where you don't have to redo that every time you have a new application, okay? But at the end of the day, what does the network call? What does the network call? Yulia, what does the network call? What actually makes that network request? What class? URL session, right? Keep that in mind from now till doomsday, right? It's not Network Helper, it's URL session, okay? Network Helper is not part of iOS. I'll keep saying it. But URL session here, this session is URL session. This is the one that goes ahead. It creates this data task for us with the request that we passed in. It has a completion on it. Either it gets data, some response, some error. And then we capture our completions. Please put a return here, update this. There was a bug here that I caught earlier. This bug was if there was no network connection. it would crash the app because it would keep going and looking for more responses. But you need to return. If there's an error, return right away. Don't keep going through the code. Next, we have our URL response. We capture URL response. This is the subclass of URL response. I use it because we need to get access to the status code, right? I need to get access to the status code to find out if everything went well. It's in the 200s, everything went well. It's not in the 200s, something went wrong. 429 we've seen before, right? We've seen 403 last week as well. We've seen those other error messages. Good. Any questions about Network Helper? For Thursday, we don't need to write Network Helper from scratch. We'll be given a Network Helper. We'll be given an app error. We'll be given some sort of image, whatever it is, extension, okay? Those three things we always like grab from a project, we have that. You yourself, you could use it whatever you want. You could use whatever you want. But given that every app we create, that's what we normally take in. And now we have date extensions as well, right? So that's not the heart of the assessment. Not to see if you could write Network Helper, but you should be able to tell us what Network Helper does in the debrief after the assessment when we come back in the new year, in 2020. When Aaron asks you, what does Network Helper do, right? You start off by saying Network Helper is a wrapper class that wraps around URL session, right? URL session does a network request, right, on our behalf, right? But Network Helper itself does not do that request, right? Inside of it is the URL session. Chelsea, you have a question? The test is Thursday. Friday, you get to go to the beach. It's a one-day assessment. The only help we'll give you guys on Thursday is clarification. There's no right? It's an assessment to assess you. So if you're coming to us, it's for clarification. You try your best. You submit what you have. And you guys will be able to do it. It's open book, right? Asking all the questions. Today we ask all the questions, not Thursday. What does this data do, right? On Thursday, right? When you see data, you're like, oh, what does data do? It's almost too late for Thursday, right? What's that? Well, review started last Monday. I've been saying that, right? We don't come in here Wednesday with like one big review. We're not crumbing. We're not crummers. We've been reviewing since last Monday. And then there's enough space for questions, right? We've been creating a questions app. Look at that. All right. Shania, how you doing? What's Network Helper? It is URL session? Okay. It's Monday, right? All right, cool. So this is Network Helper. Let's go back and continue on our code. So now we will use Network Helper to make the network post request. Let's go ahead and do that. So network helper dot shared. What's that dot shared? It's a singleton. What's a singleton? Go ahead.
Oh, it's something that can only be once, like the instance that can only be once.
Yes. So the instance of our network helper only gets created once. There's no way somebody else could come and say, let network helper equal to network helper. Nobody else could come and do this. This was not going to build. This is an error. Network initializer is inaccessible due to private protection level, right? So it's no longer available for creation. The only way we use it is by this singleton instance, the shared instance there. It's called shared instance because if we go back to network helper here, it's an instance. We know an instance because this is a class. We have open parens, close parens. It created a new instance. Okay, this is how we access it. So we say shared dot whatever we want. This is an instance method, right? Awesome. Doing good. So now let's access our perform data task method. We pass it a request. Completion is some result type. On our result type, what are we expecting? If it fails, what am I expecting? If it fails, what am I expecting? What is the failure state? What is the failure data type? App error. App error. If it succeeds, what's that data type? Data, right? Okay. So let's go write that up. So we have failure, let app error. If it's an app error, we need our completion. We don't have that yet. And here we have success, data, and we need a completion. I need to update my method signature. So now we need to update our method signature to have a completion block. Go to your method signature and update it to take a completion. Completion. We mark it at escaping because the function itself returns before the closure completes. My closure takes a result type. What do I want to return here? A Boolean is enough here, or an app error. If we get back to, if we in the success block, we basically return true. Right? If we don't have an error, we success. Right? Cool. So let's keep going. So now I want to go back to my failure block. If we do fail, I have my completion capturing a failure state here. Network error, app error. Great. If it was successful, we simply return true. And we do not need to unbox our associated value for the success state. For the catch block, what error do we have if we're in that catch block? What error do we have here? Encodable error, right? So here we'll throw an encoding error, pass it error. So this block of code you need to be able to write on Thursday. Right? One second, let other people type and then we'll go up and then talk about it. How are we doing? Good? Okay. Question? What's not auto-completing? Anytime you see Xcode not auto-completing, close it and reopen it. Any other questions? Okay, so we have our API client, it's written out. Let's go to our view controller. Am I supposed to scroll back up? Yes. There was a question in the back. Tiffany, did you ask a question earlier? Okay. Just delay for 30 seconds. She gets the answers all the time. Very good. Okay, let's keep going. Let's go to our answer question controller. Go to our answer question controller. Let's go to our post answer function. Okay, so let's keep going here. We have a text field, a text view, sorry. I need to grab that text from the text view. The text itself is optional, so I'll use a guard statement. to get my answer text on my answer text view, that text. I also want to make sure it's not empty. So I'll simply say answer text dot is empty, is not empty, by putting the not in front of it, right? Not empty. If it is empty, I will send up a message to the user, an alert, missing fields, saying answer is required. Okay, so I have my answer text, great. Let's go create some posted answer. So here we'll create a posted answer. Posted answer. Oh, we're missing some things. We don't have the question yet. But we do have the answer. We need to pass a question from the previous view controller over to this view controller because we need to know what question we answer. We need to know what question we answer. You guys want to take a short break or are you good to go? You good? Yes? Okay, so let's keep going. So we need to get a question. We don't have a question yet. Everybody is aware why we need to get a question? Because we need to send up the question title to the web API. We need to send the question ID for when we're searching later and the lab name from that question. Okay, so we need a question here. So let's create some variable here. Question is question. We'll make it optional here. So go ahead, update right below your answer text view. Have a question. It's optional. And we need to unwrap it. We'll unwrap it right in our block here. We'll say question equal to question, let question. So I added this line on 29. I added a comma after our empty. I added this new constant called question. And in our fields here, we'll pass in the question title. So question.title, question ID, and question lab name. Build, make sure you have no errors. Yes, sir.
The question that is submitted, it's already an update.
We just updated the variable right above your viewed load. Have var question colon question question mark. Create a variable called question above your viewed load. Cool. So right above our view did load, we created a question variable because we need that question. That question comes from the previous view controller. Whoever presented that view controller has the question. That's the detail controller. The detail controller has a question, so it will simply pass the question over, and we have the question. Cool? Can we continue? No? For people who are done, go over to your prepare for Segue and, well, yeah, there is a prepare for Segue. Well, there's no prepare for Segue yet. Add a prepare for Segue in your detail controller and pass a question to the answer question controller. Good? We updated the question optional here. We have a constant on it. We unwrapped it. And now we have a question. We could say question title, question ID, question lab name.
I'm getting a warning. I get like errors saying it's still optional.
Did you unwrap it using let question equal question?
Yeah, I have the same thing.
Build again, just command B. The post answer, the answer has the title, the question you answered. Tiffany?
Yeah.
Is it a question that you don't have those variables or?
I have those variables, it's just looking funny because
You answer a question, correct?
yeah.
You need that ID to be part of the answer object. The ID of the question you answered. In order to search for it later. When I click on a question, I want all the answers associated with it. The way we'll find the answers is to use the ID of the question to find all the answers for that question. Important information you also need is the title of the question. Maybe you want to show in that answer cell the question the person answered. If you do not have it, there won't be any way to get it later. Okay? For which one? Okay, let's keep going. Let's go over to our detail controller. Our detail controller, we need to prepare for Segue here. So when the user clicks on that answer button, prepare for Segue gets called. So in my detail controller, I'll set up a prepare for Segue. Prepare for Segue. I need access to my answer question controller. I get access to it via the segue.destination as answer question controller. There's no index path there. This is good. So we could simply have an error if we're not able to downcast it. So could not downcast to answer question controller. In that case, we'll verify what went wrong. But if all went well, we do have an answer question controller. We simply say answer question controller, lowercase please here, dot question equal to question. So the user clicked on the answer question button. They pass the question over to our answer controller. We downcast to the answer question controller. And we should have our question in the next controller. Let's go ahead and test, just make sure that we do pass a question correctly. So go ahead and run your app. App error. Where do we have more coding errors here? Created at. Who created a new question? Okay. How many are you trolling me? Let me just fix that API here real quick. Don't post any questions in Postman for now, please. Okay, so data. Somebody added some. Okay, there's 2. Don't click on that post button on question, please. Thank you. Build your app, make sure you have no errors, right? If you see an app error, just build your app again. That app error should go away, okay? All right, let's test our answer button. So click on any question, click on the answer button. Oh, looked like the app crashed. Did it crash for everybody?
Yes.
What do you think is happening? It says could not downcast to answer question controller, right? What do you think is happening here? Is what? What? So we have segue.destination, right? We're trying to cast something to answer question controller. Whatever you're trying to cast is not working because the type itself is not of type answer question controller. That view controller we're trying to cast to, the type is not answer question controller. So let's see what we could do to investigate that. So right in our debugger, let's simply type in PO sender. Type in PO sender dot destination. If we have it, we might not have it. We don't have it here. Let's do one more thing. Run the app again and put a breakpoint at 25. Run the app again. Let's see what that destination controller is. So run the app again, put a breakpoint right at that guard statement. Click on any question. Click on the answer button. And right where that breakpoint stops, type in PO sender destination. Why don't we have destination here? We're not getting access to the destination. PO sender. It's a Bobbin item. Title is answer. PO sender. Oh, sorry. Why, thank you, Tiffany. Very good. So, guys, it's not sender here, sorry. Segue. Thank you, Tiffany, for clearing up my Mondays here. That doesn't mean you don't have an assessment on Thursday. But that does give you brownie points. Okay, so PO segue.destination. What does it say? It says navigation controller. And the code we're doing here, we're saying cast it as, so cast this navigation controller as an answer question controller. That's not going to work. We can't take this navigation controller and cast it to an answer question controller. It's not going to work, right? Anybody knows why it's a navigation controller? What's that? We embedded it, right? So the segue.destination, right? It sees the navigation controller as that destination controller. That's what it sees. So we need to go one step further. We need to say, Mr. Navigation Controller, give me your first controller and cast that as an answer controller, right? Then we'll get to access what we want to get access to. So we have to go one extra level. So now we add the navigation controller level. We want to go, give me your view controller that first and cast that to a answer question controller. Let's see what that looks like. And again, if we go back to storyboard, we'll see exactly what's happening here. If we go back to storyboard, Back in storyboard here, this is what we have. We have this navigation controller. This is what the Segue sees. The Segue does not see this particular view controller. If we did not embed it, that would be fine. But we embedded it, so now it sees the Segue.destination as the navigation controller. So if that happens to you, which it will at some point, you'll be like, oh, I thought, right? PO, see what the controller is, Segue, not sender, right? Segue.destination, PO there. See what that controller is. Now we agreed it's a navigation controller. Now on that navigation controller, get me your first controller. It better be this controller here, because we connected it. And then we'll cast that controller to the answer question controller. Okay? Yes? A bit of stuff happening there, right? The deeper we go into development, the more complexity we'll see, right? So let's go fix that. Any questions? Any questions? Yes. Say that again. Come and take a look at it. Aaron, double check Chelsea's laptop there. Thanks, bud. Okay, so let's go ahead. So destination, we said it's a UI view controller. Everybody, let's see what's going on here. So change this answer controller to UI navigation controller. Right, so now this is a nav controller. Right, so the first line, we changed it. It's a UI navigation controller. That's what we saw when we said PO. We said PO Segue dot, right, destination. It said it's a navigation controller. Awesome. Next step. Anybody, what are we doing here? What's the next step? We got to the navigation controller. What do we want to do? Yes? Let answer question controller, right? No, this is good. What you have there so far is good. Equal to nav controller, very close. So nav controller dot view controllers dot first. Very good, Tiffany. What are you trying to do? Like really try to not do that assessment on Thursday? Question. Oh, we did not cast it. Last step. Cast. Make sure you cast here. Answer. Now that's happy. Cool? We'll run our code, we'll verify it works, and we'll come back and we'll talk about what we just did. And we should really stop there because that's a lot to grasp, right? Let's run it. I click on any question, I click on answer. It works as promised, right? We have our question, but let's go back and explain what's happening here. So, we had a problem because our view controller got embedded in a navigation controller. So now when we say segue.destination, what does it see? Yulia? Now it sees the answers, but before when it crashed, what did it see? It saw the navigation controller, right? So we had to go one step further. We had to tell the navigation controller, get me your first view controller and cast it to an answer question controller, right? So we had to do one extra step. You will come into those situations where you have to cast multiple things, which we've done before, but now we casted two controllers. The first was the navigation controller, and the second was the answer questions controller. Yes, sir?
Why do you need a dot first? In what case would you separate from the button?
You could have multiple controllers. The navigation controller itself could have multiple because it has the first, second, because they're chained. They're chained together. Like my detail could have a next controller.
Yeah. Okay.
But in our case, it's only connected to one child. But it could have multiple children, right? Does that answer your question?
I just don't know what would be an example for that.
Ideally, you don't want to have too many nested view controllers in a nav controller, but you could have at least two, right? For instance, right? You could click on one thing, it segues to the next thing. It's still part of the nav controller, right? But you want to access that particular controller. In that case, you would have to stop and then use an identifier. We haven't seen identifiers, how to access controllers using identifiers in our code. I would stop and do that instead. Like access the actual identifier on the controller stack.
So you said that if something like that, we probably like one max to that too. So would it be speak to that be like first if you want to do the first one and then last if you want to do the second one?
As I said, like if you want to access something outside of first, you probably want to access it via a storyboard identifier, which we'll talk about when we come back after the break. Right? Like how do I access a certain controller in my code in storyboard? I could have an identifier on it and say access this particular identifier. Tiffany?
Yes, please.
Cool? All right. Any questions? I'm not getting questions, but Thursday.
I see the API
API class. 1 second. Any questions about what we just did? I thought it was a bit, right? I put myself in your shoes right now. To me, it's like a bit much, but I'm not getting questions about it. Right? Oh, you want to process it? Is that what I heard? Okay, so we'll process it and then we'll come after lunch and ask questions about it. Guys, the questions is a big part of learning. I almost have a proverb there. The one who asks questions learns more. Is that a proverb? I'm making things up. If I have no more questions, I'll stop lecture here. Questions going once. Oh, I heard a question. Yes, sir.
Hi, so why do we have multiple navigation controllers
Why?
inside of each storyboard and everything?
When you say why, I'm trying to answer the why. So earlier, let me take you back for a second, Mr. Hard here. The last controller we just added was this answer question controller. We simply had a modal before. The modal did not have a nav bar. If you want to have a nav bar, you have to embed that in a nav controller. If you don't want to have a nav bar, you need to add some sort of extra button. Again, iOS 13 you could dismiss by sliding down, but prior to iOS 13, there was no way to dismiss a modal view by sliding down. Okay, cool?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so we got the one question, and then guys, please see that code because it's gonna come, and then you'll get crashes, and you'll wonder, how do I get access to that controller? Okay, all right, thank you.